I don't give anyone the right to judge me, especially intellectual criticism. If I owe anything to anyone, it's only to the audience. Few European male actors have been as iconic and influential as Alain Delon. In the 60s and 70s, he was a symbol of masculinity and French elegance. His attractiveness knew no bounds, and millions of women dreamed of this blue-eyed, handsome man. But was his life path so glamorous? And was there really such an angel hiding behind a bright appearance? Why couldn't he forgive his mother? Why didn't he recognize his first son? What connects him to the French president, the Marseille Mafia, and the body of his bodyguard found? But did he really love at least one woman in his life? You will learn much more about this in our action-packed video about the main heartthrob of the 60s, the French handsome Alain Delon. So get comfortable and we'll get started. Alain Fabien Maurice Marcel Delon was born on November 8, 1935 in Sceaux, a middle-class suburb near Paris. According to his horoscope, he's a Scorpio. People born under this sign are often described as dark and mysterious, yet also active and possessing a strong will. All these features were somehow inherent in our current hero. The actor himself said, "I, as a Scorpio, have an addicting nature. I have a rather nasty and quarrelsome character. Hence the reason of my troubles in my life. I'm strict with people with whom I work with, who surround me, but just as strict with myself, although the circumstance does not mitigate the guilt in any way." However, no zodiac sign hinted at qualities like adventurism and pragmatism in Alain Delon as a child, traits that, as they evolved over the years, would profoundly shape his destiny. The actor's father, Fabien Delon, was a rather extravagant person and prone to changing places. Unfortunately, he didn't show much interest in his eldest son. When he divorced Alain's mother, Edith, Alain was only 3 years old. But the boy will always keep in his soul the wound caused by the fact that his father left for another woman. This wound would haunt him for a long time, and it would worsen due to his strained relationship with his own son, Anthony. After Delon's mother married Paul Bellon, a butcher shop owner, Delon was taken care of by his stepfather. But Paul could not replace his own father, who soon remarried. In a new family, he had children. His blood brother, Jean-Francois, will later get a film job with Alain's help and become an assistant director. But Alain will be more friends with his parental sister, Marie-Claude, or just Didi. His mother and stepfather were deeply absorbed in their business activities, leaving Alain feeling lonely often. Realizing that the boy needed supervision, the Bellon couple gave him to another family, the Davin family, who lived in Fresnes, 5 miles from the center of Paris, surrounded him with the necessary attention, but this happiness was short-lived. Delon also recalls his stay at Fresnes due to the fact that Mr. Davin served in the security of a neighboring prison and repeatedly took the baby there with him. His companions were the children of the same guards, and Delon had seen prisoners in robes since childhood. The boy repeatedly witnessed how former prisoners are released. Then it was hard for him to imagine that many of his future characters in the cinema would find themselves in exactly the same position in scenes that their release from prison would be shot at the gates he knew from childhood. But these short, happy years ended after the untimely death of Mrs. Davin, and 11-year-old Alain again moved to live in Boulogne. Having a difficult character, Alain was often made to change educational institutions. He spent the longest time at the Jesuit Fathers boarding school in Ignay, after which he moved to another boarding school, St. Nicholas, in nearby Bivrois. However, the church fathers were never able to inspire their ward with piety and humility. He only sang with pleasure and even earned the praise of the future Pope, John the 23rd, after the latter's visit to the institution. The strict discipline of the boarding school filled Delon with only one desire: to run away as far as his eyes could see. So he did. Later, he did it together with a friend whose relative lived in Chicago. They decided to flee to the States. Why the States, you might ask?
First of all, in France, when we're kids especially, we always dream on geography books. And of course, the biggest dream was America, because America to her sounds just like a new world. Yeah. And Chicago, because it sounds good.
After another expulsion, Alain again moved to live in the house of his mother, whose care for him was reduced exclusively to basic needs, and that wasn't enough for the boy. The actor often liked to repeat the words of the German psychiatrist Kurt Goldstein, who said about him, "A terrible child, a terribly unhappy child." Alain really grew up just such a terrible child, deprived of the true love of his parents. He also lacked discipline. Don't want to go to school? Okay, it'll cost you a diploma of incomplete secondary education. Does he want to get a profession and become a butcher like his stepfather? Why not? Alain even showed diligence, and he was presented with a certificate of graduation from a special school. Everything he liked, he did perfectly. For example, he masterfully wielded a knife and an axe, butchering meat in the store of Paul Bouillon. Many girls especially went to the store to admire the handsome Alain, dressed in a white apron and cap. But he didn't care. Later, Alain will say that he is the only French actor who can competently slice ham or make pâté baked in dough. At this time, the guy began to get involved in sports. His idols were then cyclist Fausto Coppi and boxer Marcel Cerdan. He himself trained on the bike track of one of the clubs and then took boxing lessons, and this helped him a lot later on the film Rocco and His Brothers. Many years later, Delon noted, "I've always loved boxing. Champions like Sugar Robinson or Cassius Clay have a highly individual way of moving in the ring. I like this sophisticated boxing, not fighting. If I quit movies, I would take up boxing." Fortunately, he still chose to go to the movies. In addition, it was the cinema that allowed him to free himself from the guardianship of his mother, to whom he had a persistent hostility for a long time. It's no coincidence that he'll say later, "You know what it's like to be left without a mother who left you, and then hear that she's released a book telling how she raised you and cared for you tenderly? I don't wish this on anyone." In his persistent intolerance of everything that was written about him at the height of his fame, he will seek to withdraw the book of Edith Brillant-Delon from sale, but will not succeed in this and will eventually accept it. However, he admitted that if he had been pampered as a child, he would not have become a star. "My wolf teeth would have been clipped," he said. Years will pass, and with wisdom, a reassessment of himself in childhood and a different attitude towards his parents will come to him. It will take time for him to make peace with his father, who will come to his dressing room during the play "'Tis Pity She's a Whore," to better understand his parents, their system of values, and forgive their inattention. However, let's go back to the time when Alain worked in his stepfather's shop. He was quite a skilled butcher, but his plans were much more ambitious: to get out of the house as quickly as possible and live his own life. In the early 50s, posters were hung in many cities of France with the following appeal: "Come to us, you'll be able to become a fighter pilot in a year and a half." The pay was decent, so after reading one of these posters, Alain went to the specified address. However, the recruitment for the pilot school had already closed, so if not a pilot, then what? Alain chose the Navy, and later, he was sent to Vietnam. As for how Alain Delon ended up there are several legends. On the other hand, in the end, recruiters agreed to look at a 17-year-old boy as a 21-year-old, then coming of age came at the age of 21. Moreover, there were no protests from the Bouillon couple. There's also a third version, as if he was tricked into signing a consent to serve in the army for 5 years after the end of his military service. Anyway, the young man went first to study at a special center and then was sent to Toulon because he decided to specialize in radio communications. However, when he was going to be sent to Indochina after 2 years of study, the consent of his parents was required. It was signed by Fabien Delon, for which the son will then reproach him, saying that until the age of majority, the guy should hold a book in his hands, not a gun. But, one way or another, he was sent to Saigon, the modern Ho Chi Minh City. After a hard month's voyage on his ship, suffering from seasickness, Delon found himself in the waters of Indochina. Everything would have been fine if he hadn't had to obey the discipline that he had rebelled against since childhood. Sometimes he and other sailors ran AWOL on land, wandered the busy streets of Saigon, went to cafes and cinemas. During one of these walks, Alain requisitioned a jeep, and together with friends drove through the streets of the city until he got into an accident. Thus, he ended up in the police station. So I celebrated my 20th birthday alone in my cell. I remember even crying last night. Annoyed by the senior sailor's indiscipline, the authorities decided to send him home. Thus, Delon spent only 8 months in Indochina, although Alain himself has repeatedly noted that the reason for the end of the service was seasickness. Despite this, the actor later said that the army formed his character, became a school of life for him, taught him everything: to love the motherland, to understand what honor is, to respect the leadership, to be punctual. I know a lot of people won't like my words, but I was happy in the army, Delon admitted. If it wasn't for the movies, then after returning from Indochina, I would have become a career military man. I had the makings of a great soldier. After returning to the port of Marseille, the young man was waiting for a surprise: the military police. One of his fellow travelers said that he allegedly stole a revolver from the warehouse. Although no weapons were found, Delon was still put in a naval prison near Toulon for 45 days. He was released from prison on May 1st, 1956, with disgust for everything in the world. Alain was in no hurry to get home. He went to Marseille, where he worked part-time in port, and in his spare time he liked to wear a marine uniform and walk through the streets of the city, catching and admiring glances of girls. It's clear that such a handsome guy who returned from the army and therefore is familiar with weapons attracted the attention of not only girls. Marseille had a notorious reputation as one of the criminal cities in France, and Delon had to fight off the favorable offers of local authorities. It was here in Marseille that Alain Delon's acquaintance with François Marcantoni, which had started in Toulon in 1973, would later resurface in the infamous Markovic affair. We'll talk about it in more detail later. Alain Delon's friendship with this representative of the Marseille Mafia will remain true in the future, although it often later puts him in a very delicate position. The talent to do stupid things, according to the famous actor Bernard Blier, he will retain for life. Any connections with the Mafia will interfere with his life for a long time, and he will decide to break them only at an advanced age. Although some people thought that this never happened. Delon's mother, Edith, really wanted her son to come home and continue working at her husband's butcher shop. For this, she even promised Alain a scooter, but he was in no hurry to return. After all, according to one version, it was in Marseille that he met with the American Harry Wilson, a Hollywood talent scout who, noticing a slender, handsome guy, asked him if he wanted to act in films. Alain had already gained his first negative experience in filmmaking, participating in a friend's amateur short film called Leopard, in which he, roughly made up, dramatically died with his hand over his heart. Delon had unpleasant memories of this film. Here, however, the offer came from an American, from Hollywood, who was willing to pay for his trip to Rome to audition for the film A Farewell to Arms, which they intended to shoot in Italy in 1956. Delon, who had nothing to lose, went to Rome where he successfully passed the auditions. Producer David O. Selznick immediately offered him a 7-year contract in Hollywood with this company, but Alain was in no hurry to agree, asked for time to think, and went to Paris. There, he worked as movers with one of his friends in the evenings. Alain's mother, Edith, not without the help of the police, found her son and, having connections in the capital, got him a job as a waiter in a beer hall on the Champs-Élysées. Interestingly, then he had a short but passionate affair with a then unknown girl named Dalida, who would become a legendary singer, and in 1973 they would record together the famous hit Paroles, Paroles. No one even knew that the two stars had a passionate past together until Delon published his book, The Women of My Life, in 2011. We loved each other far from the crowd. Few witnesses knew about Dalida and me, but they remained silent for many years. Sometimes he went to the Paris quarter of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. There he met aspiring actor Jean-Claude Brelly and the already famous actress Brigitte Aubert, with whom he fell head over heels in love, although she was 8 years older than him. Brigitte also genuinely admired the ignorant guy who, at that time, did not even know who Cézanne, Monet, Rembrandt, and Renoir were, whose paintings he would later become famous and rich, diligently collect. But at that time, Alain considered Frank Sinatra a genius and whistled his songs all the time, and also praised the actor John Garfield. Brigitte, with whom he, according to her, began a charming and beautiful, despite some tension, relationship, undoubtedly played an important role in raising the cultural level of Alain. She also persuaded him to go to theater courses, from which, however, he immediately ran away. So, how did Delon get into French cinema? There are many versions, and many attributed this honor to themselves to help the aspiring actor in his career. The most plausible story seems to us to be the actor of Bernard Blier. It was Blier who brought him together with Michel Cordu, the then wife of director Yves Allégret. Yves, after reviewing his Roman auditions, invited Delon to his new film, Send a Woman When the Devil Fails, where the main role was given to Bernard Blier. But Delon was in no hurry to agree because he had no acting experience. Yves has not yet persuaded Delon, but has already entered into a fight with the producers to ensure that this particular actor gets the role. And when the director still managed to convince the management, he told Delon that now he simply had to accept the offer.
Et je dois dire que je l'ai fait vraiment pour lui faire plaisir. Parce que je voyais cet homme qui avait tellement envie que je fasse son rôle, tellement envie que je fasse son film, et moi qui ne voulais pas, je lui ai écouté vraiment, je le fais pour vous faire plaisir. Et j'ai commencé comme ça.
In the film, Alain played the role of young killer Joe. Already in this debut film, he looked absolutely organic, deftly manipulated weapons, and without a large number of dialogues, behaved very freely in front of the camera. However, in the beginning, he still had difficulties. As the actor himself noted, I didn't know how to do anything. Allégret looked at me like this and said, "Listen to me carefully, Alain. Speak as you speak to me. Look the way you look at me. Listen as you listen to me. Don't play, live." It changed everything. If Yves Allégret hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have had this career. Later, Delon also recalled an episode from the filming on Avenue Victor Hugo. They explained to me that I go out with a bag of cakes and in no way should I look at the camera. That is, act as if there is no one around. I said, I understand. I do this every day. I immediately felt in my place. Others felt it too. Journalist Georges Baumy, who was present at the shooting, could not take his eyes off him and wrote in his popular weekly Jour de France some nice words about the debutante. Despite the fact that the film received mediocre reviews from critics, for Delon, it was more than a successful start. The young actor, although he became more confident in his acting abilities, did not neglect the advice of other actors. So, for example, Edwige Feuillée taught Alain to carefully prepare for the role and before shooting, forget all the preparation so that the game does not seem mechanical and memorized. Feuillée also introduced Delon to one of the best producers of French cinema, Olga Holstik. It is no coincidence that Alain Delon would later call Olga his godmother in the cinema. Yves Allégret was quite satisfied with Delon and with a light heart gave him to his older brother, Marc Allégret, who was going to shoot the crime comedy Be Beautiful But Shut Up. Alain Delon and Jean-Paul Belmondo played buddies who happened to witness diamond smuggling. Next to the professional Belmondo, the completely inexperienced Delon did not look helpless. Perhaps because he had to play an uncomplicated character in an environment that he was known for living in Marseille. But one way or another, he quite coped with this role and even struck up a close friendship with Belmondo, which will last until the days of the latter's life. As for the film, like Delon's first film, it received mediocre reviews from critics. From that moment on, Alain could have completely established himself in such roles of antisocial types, scoundrels, but the fate favorable to him decided otherwise. Once Jean-Claude Brialy burst into his room and told a wonderful news, the director Pierre Gaspard Truit, with whom he's going to act, agreed to audition with him. It turns out that he drew attention to Delon in a picture by Marc Allégret. He needed a good actor for the role of Lieutenant in the movie Christine. Together with Brialy, Alain went to the film crew of the upcoming film, a remake of the famous film by Max Ophuls, Playing at Love. During the audition, Brialy helped him with lines. Alain returned home upset. It seemed to him that he had failed, but the director saw the striking photogenicity of a young and not very confident guy. The fact that he wasn't very good at acting didn't bother him. Truit was convinced that Delon would make a great match for German star Rosemarie Magdalena Albach, for whom the whole film was started. In this film, the actress performed under the name of her mother and a peculiar name, Romy Schneider. Delon was told that he would have a charming partner, and Schneider was promised a young and talented partner. Alain had no idea about the huge popularity of Romy beyond the Rhine. For several years, she played the former Austrian Empress Elizabeth, nicknamed Sissy. She was loved by the audience of Austria and Germany, and she was popular in other countries. The talented young actress, undoubtedly, tired of such a long stay in one image, and when she was offered a star in France in a role that her mother once played, she willingly agreed. The mother's objections and the family's persuasions did not yield any results. The actress felt that this role would change her life. In turn, Alain Delon, who had been handed an armful of white roses by the producer to give to his future co-star at Orly Airport, had no idea what significant roles she would eventually play in his life. One thing was clear to him. She would be paid 75 million old francs, while he and Brialy would each receive only 300,000. There is a legend that as soon as they met, they fell madly in love with each other. In fact, it was the other way around. Romy Schneider later said that when she saw Alain at the ramp, she only got annoyed. I saw a man who was too handsome, too young, and too coiffed for my liking. Alain annoyed her with everything, with his eternal lateness to filming, with his mocking look in response to her sullen face, by not paying much attention to her, by not expressing the admiration she was used to in her homeland. There was a war between us all the time, she said later. Before going to full-scale filming in Vienna, the actors went to Brussels for a film festival, which then attracted many stars. During the train ride, surprisingly, they did not quarrel, but flirted. In Brussels, where the whole family of the actress gathered, Romy regained her character and, despite the indignation of her parents, spent a lot of time with Delon. In Vienna, their relationship only grew stronger. Romy really fell in love, and it was mutual. As soon as Alain left for Paris, she followed him and soon settled into his apartment. When the actress's parents found out about this, they did not raise a scandal. However, they began to correspond with Delon. In their letters, they hinted that he and Romy should still get married and invited Alain to visit Switzerland. The bride was not happy with the fact that everything was decided behind her back. "We talked about getting engaged, but we never talked about getting married," Schneider said indignantly. "Alain was already my husband and I was his wife. We didn't need any documents." However, even before the altar, the couple began to have problems in their relationship. They were both in demand in the film industry and there was less and less time for each other. Delon closed his eyes to the tears of his beloved, who lacked his attention, and the irritation between them only grew. Romy belonged to the class I hated the most in the world. How could I free her in a short time from the looks that had fed her for 20 years before? There were two Romy Schneider. I loved the first one more than anything else in the world, and I hated the other one just as much. After the filming of Christine, which by the way had more than 3 million screenings in France, which made it the 17th most popular film at the French box office in 1958, the joint work of the newlyweds on the same set ended. Romy returned to Germany and Delon went to Italy to shoot his next film, Purple Noon, by René Clément. However, while engaged, they took part in another joint project, John Ford's theater play, Pity She's a Whore, staged by Luchino Visconti on the stage of the Theatre de Paris. This happened in 1961 after Alain's collaboration with Visconti on the famous film Rocco and His Brothers. Visconti, for a long time, actively disliked Schneider. Any visit to Alain in Milan and Rome, where Rocco was filmed, caused indignation and sarcasm on his part. Visconti's homosexual tendencies were well known, but there's no evidence that there was an informal relationship between the actor and the director. For a while, Alain unsuccessfully asked the bride to meet Visconti, and in the end, she gave up. In her book, I, Romy, the actress, wrote, "Alain and I are going to see Visconti. He sits in the salon in a huge leather chair, staring at me as if thinking, so this is Alain's girlfriend? I'll let this shatter any illusions he has about her." However, the actress did not believe that there was anything between Luchino and Alain. In those days as now, there was a lot of talk about their relationship. Romy wrote, "I think that Visconti simply loved Alain because he felt in him the talent of a great actor, and he wanted to give shape to this raw material. At the same time, he behaved like a tyrant, claiming his exceptional attention." Delon himself said of Visconti, "Luchino is an aesthete. He loved beauty, giving preference to male beauty. He wasn't in love with me, but he was infatuated." That's true. Despite all the gossip, Visconti will soon sympathize with Schneider and plan to put on a play with newlyweds in the main roles. If Alain had no experience playing on stage before and was very concerned about this particular aspect, Romy was more concerned about her imperfect knowledge of French and noticeable accent. The ambiguous and provocative play told about the unambiguous relationship between a brother and sister. Rehearsals were difficult for both main performers. The feelings they had for each other in life, Visconti extrapolated to their characters while achieving maximum return. Just before the premiere, Romy had an attack of appendicitis. She underwent surgery, however 2 weeks later she was standing on stage to the stormy applause of the audience, admiring her courage. Despite this, the opinions of theater critics were divided. Some thought that too much was spent on costumes, while others were not happy with some of the director's decisions. But there were also those who saw a huge potential in the young Delon. A beautiful young man has become a man. He got rid of amateurism, both on stage and on the screen. We have a real actor in front of us, able to experience torment, emptiness, forget about what you need not to like so much as to delight. The critics wrote at the time. As for Delon himself, he did not expect that working on a role in the theater would be so difficult for him. He said that he didn't feel at home in the theater, and he called the most difficult scene with experiences. He had a hard time getting used to the suit, which revealed, in his words, shivering chicken calf muscle. Later in the film, Famous Love Affairs, a similar costume and stockings will again emphasize his thin and crooked legs, and I'll try to show them to the audience as little as possible. Despite these shortcomings and obvious difficulties, Alain enjoyed working with Romy on the play. Romy and I loved each other very much back then. Playing with the person you love is quite another matter. There's no need to force anything. It seems that I still managed to integrate into a world that was alien to me at the time. The performance had more than 100 screenings on the Paris stage, and this is a lot for the French capital. But then, as after Christine, the couple again had to break up. He went to Italy to act with René Clément in The Joy of Living, and then with Michelangelo Antonioni in the film L'Eclisse. And Romy had enough work. Both of them did not yet realize that they were increasingly moving away from each other, especially Romy. She didn't want to admit that their relationship was only a few months away. Alain took the decisive step. In early 1963, Romy left to act in Hollywood. Alain escorted her to the airfield. When Romy returned to Paris a few months later, she did not see him at the airport, but at home she found 4 dozen black roses on the table and a note. "We were engaged, but we didn't have time to get married. Our profession, we don't see each other at all, and only meet at airports robs us of any chance to avoid a breakup. I give you back your freedom, and keep your heart." Starting with a bouquet of white roses at Orly Airfield 5 years ago, their relationship ended with symbolic black roses. Romy never got over it. She tried to start a life without Delon, although on the set they met several more times after the breakup, which we will discuss later. The actress married twice, and both times it did not give her happiness. After her beloved son died and her first husband voluntarily passed away, she remarried and gave birth to a daughter. After undergoing severe kidney surgery, Romy began drinking alcohol and eventually, due to relentless pain, turned to banned substances. Romy's condition worsened even more after her ex-husband took her daughter away from her by a court decision. The life of the once beautiful and successful actress ended on May 29, 1982, when she decided to depart her life. After that, Alain wrote a letter to his ex-lover where he reflected on the reasons why everything turned out the way they did. And many years later, he made a kind of ode to love, choosing Romy Schneider as the muse among all his lovers. Anyway, in the actor's dressing room later, Romy's dress from that joint theater play hung for a long time. Was it a torment of conscience or a tribute to their love? What do you think? Write in the comments. It'll be interesting to discuss. However, let's go back. After starring in Michel Boisseron's 1959 film Women Are Weak, Alain Delon had already set the stage for taking on more challenging roles. The director allowed him to play a kind of philanderer based on the reputation and external data of the young actor. Therefore, it was necessary to assert himself, to show what he was capable of. Delon already had a rather high opinion of himself. Christine did not bring him much fame from the audience. Pierre Gaspard Huit clearly did not work enough with the actors, paying more attention to the visual side of the picture, which he undoubtedly succeeded in, and this affected in particular the roles of the main characters. With Michel Boisseron, Delon was more interesting. His partners were popular too: Pascal Petit, Mélanie de Mongot, and Jacqueline Saussade. The trio will join forces to destroy the heartthrob played by Alain. The actor felt at ease playing a real seducer. After the release of the film, he first felt an undisguised interest in his personality in public. Michel Boisseron was very pleased with him and immediately invited him to his next film, Way of Youth, which told the story of a young man in the atmosphere of German-occupied Paris in 1944. On the set, Alain met and befriended actor Lino Ventura, to whom he will always express his respect and love. After finishing work on the film, which was later a success at the French box office and even released in the United States, Delon was looking forward to shooting René Clément's Purple Noon. The actor really wanted to play the role of Tom Ripley and put a lot of effort into it. The fact is that initially René Clément chose him for the role of Philippe, but Delon literally clung to the role of Tom. He read the script and decided to go all in, and therefore showed up at the director's apartment where the future producers of the film, the Hakim brothers, and Clément's wife Bella, whose opinion the director often listened to, were also present. Alain began presenting arguments to René, explaining why he should be cast as Tom instead of the then popular Jacques Charrier. Delon spoke passionately, although he lacked the skills of diplomacy. The producers were impressed by the young man's impudence, but Bella liked Delon's passionate nature and asked René to give him a chance. Clément listened to his wife and postponed the start of filming for 3 weeks to finalize the script and find an actor for the role of Philippe, played by Maurice René. Alain wanted to live up to the director's hopes and expectations for him at all costs, and therefore very consciously and responsibly approached his role. And it was quite interesting for him, a friend of the son of an American billionaire who goes to Italy to return him, but later stops at nothing to take over his life in the heart of his beloved woman. With the help of the director, who was known for his ability to work with non-professional actors, Delon managed to literally plunge headlong into the image of his hero. Clément often suggested that the actor improvise. "You don't always have to go according to the script, you have to go forward," the director assured. Paper and text limits the means of expression. The script is similar to a score that doesn't have a tempo designation. We need to breathe life into it. Alain Delon has always spoken of René Clément with tenderness and respect. Clément conducted the actors like Karajan conducted an orchestra. He stopped them, made them start again, speak lower or louder. He treated me like a doll. He pulled one string, then another. Alain Delon then needed just such a puppeteer. With its help, he gained experience. Not going to stop there. Interestingly, Luchino Visconti's working method, who would direct him next, was similar to that of Clemensky. He also showed the actors what he wanted from them, made them repeat intonations. In the meantime, Alain Delon was thrilled with his success under René's direction, as René was the first to give him the opportunity to play a dynamic character, a role that would evolve and appear in many of Delon's future films. Released in March 1960, the film immediately attracted the attention of critics and viewers and made them talk about Alain Delon as the hope of French cinema. Critics emphasized that with his devilish soul and angelic appearance, he appears as an ideal character in the film. The general opinion was expressed in the newspaper François. Finally, Alain Delon found his hero, a man with a double bottom, a fallen angel.
Ça paraît quand même terriblement compliqué, ça, dites-moi. Vous seriez pris tout de suite, vous?
Pas forcément. Vous savez, j'ai l'air comme ça. Mais mon imagination...
Elle nous écoute. Parlons vite, dites-moi n'importe quoi.
But journalists then did not even realize that soon the actor himself could be described with a double bottom, and all because of his secret romance with singer, model, and actress Nico. whom he met on the set of Purple Noon. She got a cameo role, however she did not have time to shoot due to a busy modeling schedule and was replaced. However, Delon managed to notice this beauty and a short-term romance began between them. He was the most dangerous man I ever met. He was like a gypsy with strong eyes and dark hair, and I wanted him for myself. Forgetting about Romy, who was still his fiancée at the time, after filming was over, Alain followed Nico to the United States, where the couple lived together for several months, and then Delon returned to Europe, leaving the woman with the hope of returning. She later found out that she was pregnant. I stayed 3 months in New York alone, thinking he would come. Later on, distressed, I went to Paris to look for him, to meet him. I tried to call him, but I couldn't contact him. Invariably, they always told me Alain was absent, the actress said. Still under stress, she went to visit her mother in Spain. She asked Nico to terminate the pregnancy, but the model was categorically against it. Meanwhile, Delon, unaware of these passions, was basking in the rays of glory. Critics and the public admired his performance, and some even called him the successor of Gérard Philippe. However, Alain did not have time to enjoy the popularity that had fallen on him. After showing Clément's picture in Paris, he flew back to Rome, where Luchino Visconti was waiting for him, annoyed that Alain was always late. The great Italian director was eager to start working on a film about a family of Southerners, Parandi, who come to the north, to Milan, in search of work and face new problems. According to Delon himself, his first meeting with Visconti took place in 1958 in London, where he staged Verdi's opera, Don Carlos. Alain went there with Olga Horstig, their mutual friend. After finishing the opera, Horstig introduced the young actor Visconti. Delon later learned from her that Luchino had told her, quote, "As soon as I saw him, I knew it was Rocco." Alain's approval for the role of Rocco was undoubtedly helped by the huge success of the film Purple Noon, which made the candidacy of an aspiring actor acceptable for the producers of this joint Italian-French production. Filming began in late February 1960 and lasted 4 months. They were accompanied by the inevitable technical difficulties in film production. At first, the municipality of Milan put a spoke in their wheels because Visconti wanted to shoot in the poorest part of the city, and this, they say, could harm the image of Milan. A lot of nerves were strained by Visconti and Profundi, as the cast and crew often referred to the Rocco family during the production. This very popular surname in the South, as it turned out, the bishop, the former chairman of the court, and the general. They didn't want some simpleton family in the film to be called Profundi. The case almost went to court, and then the director had to rename Profundi to Parandi. On the set, work began to boil over. Visconti demanded from the actors the utmost precision and expressiveness in words and gestures. How many cuts it took is really unknown, but the result was obvious. Alain Delon appeared as a strong, dramatic actor in the film. The deeply hidden emotionality in it was able to splash out on the screen. The role turned out to be so bright that it is the frenzied success of this picture that Delon owes to his future career.
creduto da poter cominciare insieme una nuova vita.
Immediately after Rocco, Alain Delon returned to René Clément to star in his film The Joy of Living, a comedy in Italian traditions where Delon first created the tragicomic image of a servant of two masters during Mussolini's fascism. If in his previous film with Clément he played an American, this time he played an Italian. The film was shot on purely Italian material, showing with a fair amount of irony and sarcasm the events of Italian history. During filming, Delon gestured like a real son of Italy. There was a spark of madness in his eyes, and his hair was smeared with diamond according to the norms of the 20s. Unfortunately, the film was released in France at a bad time. In the midst of the Algerian War and terrorist attacks by the Secret Army Organization, or SAO for short, the French were not laughing then. And although critics appreciated Delon's rare comic role, it took some time for René Clément's film to be appreciated by the audience. This happened in 1964, when the first retrospective films with Delon's participation was organized at the Cinémathèque. But in Italy, he had a resounding success and consolidated the position of a young actor in the Italian box office. Now, Delon began to read the scripts that were sent to him, clearly realizing that after Clément and Visconti, he should be careful when choosing new directors. However, he could not refuse Michel Boisseron, with whom he became friends in the films Women Are Weak and Way of Youth. Boisseron offered him a role in one of the sketches of the film Famous Love Affairs with the star of French cinema Brigitte Bardot. This sketch told the tragic love story of the heir to the Bavarian throne, Duke Albert III, played by Alain, and the daughter of a barber surgeon, Agnes Bonnier, played by Bardot. This work did not take him much time and did not require much creative effort, and this was very much felt by both critics and viewers. As for Brigitte, she was thrilled with her partner at first. When she saw him, she said, "Well, what's next? My Louis, the 14th chest of drawers, is also beautiful." Brigitte later wrote in her memoirs that Delon annoyed her very much, thinking only of the blue of his eyes, of his pretty face, and not paying attention to his partner. The actress also admitted that Alain, in love scenes, instead of looking at her, looked only in the direction of the searchlight located behind her so that it illuminated the blue of his eyes. So she did the same, looking passionately at his squire, played by Pierre Massimi. It was hard to think of a better one, Bardot jokes. Delon confessed his love to the searchlight and I to his squire, and they are also surprised that the sketch didn't work out. If they put a lantern in my place, it would have been the same. Despite the fact that her handsome partner left her with bad memories, she did not refuse to star with him in another sketch, this time in Louis Malle's film Spirit of the Dead in 1967, that is, 6 years after the famous novels. He had two roles there, a card cheater and his double. Here, Delon paid due attention to his partner, which returned her sympathy to him. Today, I consider Delon the most beautiful, talented actor who can take the place of Jean Gabin or someone else. His talent is undeniable, and his appearance and character have changed. He has become stricter, more beautiful. Delon himself was working hard at the time. In 1962, with his participation, another sketch was released in Julien Duviviers' film The Devil and the Ten Commandments, which illustrated the commandment, honor your father and mother. However, all his thoughts were already in Italy, where he was waiting for another grandee of Italian cinema, Michelangelo Antonioni, and shooting in the new film L'Eclisse. Antonioni probably noticed Delon after the films of Clement and Visconti shot in Italy. His Italian-French co-production required a French actor to play a calculating and intelligent stockbroker. Delon was interested in the script, and the prospect of starring with such a beautiful and talented actress as Monica Vitti was also very tempting. Alain Delon liked to act with beautiful actresses. However, the director focused more on Vitti, and Alain was left on his own, and he even liked it. Due to the emotionality of his character on the stock exchange during trading, Delon constantly fell out of the frame and the operator had to catch him. Despite this, he managed to get used to the image of his Piero, and the rather capricious director was satisfied with it. However, Delon himself considered this work an accident, although he hoped that the injury of the Cannes Film Festival in 1962 would award him the prize for Best Actor. But it wasn't meant to be. Despite this, L'Eclisse has firmly entered the collection of Delon's best acting achievements over the years.
Aperto non vedi manca 700. Prova a comprarne qualche centinaio.
From the Cannes Film Festival, Alain again went to Italy to shoot Visconti's next film, The Leopard. Interestingly, the novel, based on which the film was made, as well as the picture itself, was called The Serval in Italian. Is it translation difficulties? Has the world decided that a serval and a leopard are essentially one animal, even though they're not? It's not known, but that's not what we're talking about right now. The serval is the nickname of the old prince, the uncle of the young prince, Tancredi Falconeri, played by Alain Delon. The film tells about the life of this prince against the background of socio-political upheavals after the unification of Italy in the mid-19th century. Visconti invited American actor Burt Lancaster to play the old aristocrat and gave the role of beautiful Angelica to Claudia Cardinal, who played Rocco's daughter-in-law in the film Rocco and His Brothers. Guided by the iron hand of the director, Alain Delon played his role in different tones. He was piercingly gentle in scenes with his uncle, who became a second father for him, determined with Angelica, almost rude and straightforward with his future father-in-law, for whom the marriage of his daughter was the only opportunity to get into the highest caste. These acting attempts were appreciated by critics, for which Alain received a Golden Globe nomination as Best Debutante, and The Leopard itself was enthusiastically received at the Cannes Film Festival in 1963, where it received the Grand Prix de Palme d'Or.
Quando l'esercito di Garibaldi si sciolse, si poteva scegliere, o ritornare a casa o restare nelle armate reali. Lui, io, come tanti altri, abbiamo deciso di entrare nell'esercito vero.
However, in addition to pleasant ones, the actor was waiting for another surprise. After all, on August 11, 1962, his former mistress, Nico, gave birth to a boy, whom she named Christian Aaron Bouillon, but whom everyone called Ari. Nico first announced her son to Delon in a letter, and then went with her ex-lover to a meeting, having learned that he was in Sicily on the set of The Leopard. He agreed to help his ex-lover financially, but later his secretary told Nico that Alain wants this story to be finished. And indeed, Alain's thoughts were then occupied with something completely different. In 1963, his cherished dream finally came true. He starred in the same film with Jean Gabin. He often told Olga Horstig about this, and she finally managed to fulfill his wish. We can say that no one influenced Alain Delon as much as Jean Gabin, who, as you know, preached the theory of changing genres and roles. Knowing how to play everything, he appeared on the screen as a gangster, then a police commissioner, then in a comedy genre, then in a melodrama. Applying this method to himself, Delon would call it, quote, alternating black and white. The first step towards this was Henry Verneuil's picture, Any Number Can Win. The script for the film was originally written for Jean Gabin, who was then almost 60 years old, and he began to move on to the roles of bandits. His hero, Mr. Charles, who planned to rob a safe in a casino in Nice, needed a young assistant. The role of this assistant, named Francis, went to Delon. It is known that Gabin was capricious when choosing partners, and then producer Jacques Barre offered him the candidacy of Alain, whom Jean Gabin saw in the films Purple Noon and Rocco and His Brothers, and did not imagine in the role of Francis. Therefore, Delon's candidacy was approved only on the condition that he receives only interest on fees in specific countries. In Eastern Europe, where Gabin was popular, in Japan, where he was adored by young people, and in Argentina. As it turned out later, Alain did not lose at all because the film was a great box office success. Gabin himself later admitted that Alain earned more from this picture than he did. Alain Delon coped with his task quite successfully. Moreover, he managed to win the sympathy of the old man, as he would later call Gabin. He was adept at flattering Jean's ego, showing a helpfulness that the capricious Gabin greatly appreciated. It was Jean who advised him to invest in real estate. Delon obeyed and soon became the owner of several estates in different parts of France. Gabin also advised him to start a racing stable. It's known about his passion for horse racing. Within a few years, Delon's own horses had already successfully competed with Gabin's. In the future, Alain would show his talents as a businessman in a number of other industries. So, for example, he'll create his own production company and produce his own films. We'll talk about other businesses later. In the same happy year for him in 1963, Delon starred with René Clément in the film Joy House. He was attracted not only to working with his favorite director, but also to his American partners Jane Fonda and Lola Albright, although the plot itself seemed rather boring to him. The film Joy House added nothing to Delon's reputation at that time. The actor played a rather boring heartthrob who's initially deceived by two women and ultimately becomes a prisoner of one of them. This gave some critics a reason to sneer at the new image of the actor and anticipate his further decline if he does not take a more responsible approach to choosing roles. With Clément, he will meet on the set just 2 years later in the epic film dedicated to the anniversary of the liberation of Paris, Is Paris Burning?, where for the first time he'll play a specific historical figure, the representative of General de Gaulle in the National Committee of the Resistance, Jacques Chaban-Delmas. Alain Delon looked like his prototype. I was dug up 20 years ago, Chaban-Delmas, then president of the National Assembly, will say, flattering not only the actor but also himself. But in this picture, Alain Delon played not so much a character as a pose. In the future, he'll say that he agreed to take part in the film not so much for the sake of the fee, which was quite impressive, but for the sake of René Clément. As for the film itself, it received generally positive reviews and became the fourth most popular film of 1966 in France. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Director and a Golden Globe for Best Original Music. However, let's go back to 1963. Then, as soon as he finished Joy House, Delon went to Spain, where he was already waiting for full-scale filming of The Black Tulip by Christian Jacques, with whom 2 years ago he began work on the unrealized film Marco Polo. There, Alain played two twins of noble origin who found themselves on opposite sides of the barricades in the days leading up to the Revolution of 1789. Delon was undoubtedly attracted to the prospect of playing two completely different characters. He really wanted to repeat the success of Gérard Philippe and the image of Fanfan La Tulipe. Unlike Fanfan La Tulipe, which organically combined burlesque and satire, Christian Jacques this time, in the name of creating an entertaining film, often sacrificed logic of motivation and sometimes elementary plausibility. However, he forced Delon to ride a horse, fence, participate in comic fights, and he did everything with the usual dexterity and plasticity. Filming took place in a friendly atmosphere, which Christian Jacques was so able to create. The film was a great success at the French and global box office, selling more than 55 million tickets and grossing more than $15 million at the box office. Alain Delon spent all his free time in a luxury villa near Madrid during the filming of The Black Tulip in the company of his new lover, whom he met in Paris and whom he called Nathalie. Her real name was Francine Canoves. She wanted to make a career as an actress, and one day she was invited to a nightclub where Delon once stopped by with friends. The actor liked the pretty young woman, and they started dating. Everything would have been fine, but at that time he was still in a relationship with Romy Schneider, and sometimes he was tormented by remorse. But soon, Nathalie told him that she was expecting a child with him. Therefore, Delon decides to let Romy go in a way that's already known to us and legalize the relationship with his new lover. Their wedding took place on August 13, 1964, in the presence of two witnesses. The bride was wearing a blue dress and the groom was wearing a light gray suit. The press wrote that they both looked very confused. We got married. When the priest said the sacramental "you unite to be together in sorrow and joy," she continued to herself, but not necessarily forever and ever. So, however, later it turned out. Some journalists took the opportunity to reproach the actor, writing that they would no longer describe him as a heartthrob, a dangerous seducer, Casanova, but in vain. After all, he was not going to give up other women, even in marriage. So, for example, in her autobiography, actress Maurice Mel wrote about a short romance with Delon before and after his engagement to Nathalie. They, according to Maurice, met on a plane to Yugoslavia. She described Alain as passionate and animalistic. Apparently, the actor made a bigger impression on her than Mel did on him because Delon didn't even mention her in his book. At the same time, he was more concerned about a new project in which he invested his own funds called Letter to the Mother, which would later be called The Unvanquished. Delon met director Alain Cavalier back in 1961 when he was working with Romy Schneider. So Delon's new film company decided to make its production debut with this compelling film. Alain played the role of unprincipled Legionnaire Thomas, who joined the ranks of paratroopers and then moved to the OAS solely for the sake of money. He didn't care which side to fight on as long as they paid him. But later, after meeting one woman, he will change his views. Alain Delon played such a character for the first time, but it was clear to the actor it was his contemporary with his negative and positive qualities. Perhaps Delon still gave his best because he was the producer of the film and wanted his debut in this capacity to be successful, so that the funds invested in the film would not be lost. He was often asked why he became a producer. He answered honestly, to have the freedom to choose the stories and people with whom I would like to work. I chose this film without even reading the script, but as you know, 9 times out of 10, you get a script with a role written for you according to who you are. Unfortunately, the film was not released at the best of times, and he suffered the same fate as The Joy of Living 3 years earlier. Delon, as a producer, had to accept censorship's demands for cuts. The country was struggling to recover from the failed OAS coup, and it was clearly not ready to admire the terrorist from the OAS, even if this hero was played by Alain Delon. But critics reacted positively to the picture. They praised the actor and made no secret of their surprise that Delon was so convincing in such a difficult role. Some even wrote, Alain Delon has never spoken so well as when he was silent. The audience had different views. Many did not approve of the position of the authors, and at the same time the actors. It will be 4 years before Delon pays off his debts and can start a new production project, the film Borsellino. In the meantime, Hollywood was waiting for him.
Welcome to Hollywood, Alain.
Thank you, Bob. I'm delighted to be over here, even though it is now spring in Paris, and chestnuts are in bloom.
You should feel right at home. Some of mine are bloom tonight, too.
In the same year, 1964, he finally decided to go to the conquest of Hollywood. Once, as we remember, he did not accept Selznick's invitation, but now the situation was different. He had a number of successful projects under his belt, his name is familiar in the United States, and he took less risks. When asked why he was going to the United States when he had so much work in France, he answered with the question, why not? If there is a director who suits me, this is the chance for me. Alain Delon reached New York on the world's largest liner, France at that time. A young pregnant wife, a dog named Brando, a nanny for the future heir, and a cook, as well as 5 suitcases, traveled together with him. The move went well. From New York, they were transferred to Los Angeles and settled in a luxury villa. Delon was most impressed by Hollywood Boulevard. In the 2 years that he spent in Hollywood, sometimes traveling to France, Delon starred in 3 films. One of them was the film Once a Thief by Ralph Nelson, where the actor played the role of an Italian Yugoslav immigrant in the United States, caught in the vicissitudes of the criminal world. Interestingly, he was later credited with having an affair with a female lead, Anne Margaret. And this is despite the fact that on November 30th, just during filming, he found out that his legal wife, Nathalie, was taken to the hospital, and a few hours later they reported that she had given birth to a son, whom they had previously decided to name Anthony. Delon was given permission to visit them, and upon his return, he treated the entire film crew to champagne and continued working. Nathalie soon returned to Paris. The film Once a Thief was not a great success, but Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, with whom Delon had a contract, gave the actor to Mark Robson, who was shooting the war drama Lost Command in Spain at that time. Alain got the role of a French captain, and the woman he was in love with was played by Claudia Cardinal, who was already familiar to him. The plot of the film was interesting for both the actor and the audience because it told about the revolt of an honest man against permissiveness in the army. But critics in France reacted very harshly to the film. After all, it touched on the painful problem of the war in Algeria. However, they could not deny the excellent performance of the actors, which they wrote about in the press. The third film made with his participation by Americans was Michael Gordon's Texas Across the River. Delon played the role of a noble-born Spaniard, Balthazar, a loser and poor guy who is hired to perform a dangerous task, to sell contraband weapons to the Comanche Indians. As a result, he finds himself in the most ridiculous and dangerous situations. Balthazar was a typical character in an adventure comedy. Critics then even called the picture a comic western. However, Alain made his character not only comical but also human, and he unwittingly turned out to be attractive to the viewer. In 1966, Alain Delon was supposed to stay in Hollywood, but he missed his son and wife and therefore returned to his homeland. Interestingly, it was during this period that his mother, unrecognized son Ari, moved to live with Edith, Alain's own mother. The fact is that Nika was actively building a career at this time and therefore often left the boy to her mother for a long time. That newly minted nanny who struggled with her own addictions was unable to take care of the baby. Eventually, Delon's mother and stepfather found out about Ari, to whom Nico wrote. They came to a meeting with their grandson, saw the conditions in which he grew up, and took the boy to their home. Over time, they adopted Ari and raised him as their own child. Later, Edith said that Nico visited her son only once every 3 years, and the model herself said that she was simply not allowed near Ari. And there was a reason. The model became addicted to banned substances, and it was said that she even gave her pills to her 4-year-old son, which almost led to his death. Delon himself, having learned about the act of his mother, finally spoiled relations with her. He could not forgive her his childhood in another family and her recognition of a child that he himself did not recognize. Delon had a son born in his marriage to Nathalie, and it was to him that the actor was in a hurry, buying out his contract and returning from the States to Paris on the same liner, now with 12 suitcases. He wrote about America later. America is a life choice rather than a career choice. I need a bistro, a piece of bread, and this is much more important than the offer to become the biggest star in the world. Some objective reasons also prompted Delon to return to his homeland. After all, before leaving for Hollywood, he became the subject of a scandal. It all started with the publication of his interview in the July 1964 issue of the European edition of the New York Herald Tribune. With someone's obvious submission, they wanted to compromise him in front of their fellow countrymen. The newspaper correspondent relayed Delon's alleged words that he, quote, does not work well in France, that under these circumstances he feels that America needs him. Of course, the French did not like such statements, and Delon sent a letter to the newspaper Figaro where he was outraged about the truthfulness of the materials presented, called the Herald Tribune a fake, and promised to sue. As for the submission to the court, nothing's known about it. However, after returning to France, the actor had to do everything to make his fellow countrymen forget about this scandal. He needed practical work to regain popularity, which had decreased due to his long absence. Therefore, in 1967, Alain Delon starred in several films that pursued this task. Among them was Robert Enrico's adventure film The Last Adventure. There, Delon played one of 3 adventurers, pilot Manu, who, along with his car mechanic friend and artist, go on a treasure hunt in the Congo and who are waiting for many dangers and adventures. It was a film about friendship and love, against the backdrop of a cruel reality. Alain Delon and Lino Ventura made up a wonderful tandem of friends to rivals, strong and courageous people. The romantic background was seamlessly woven into the main adventurous plot, complementing it. Alain Delon played the role of Manu as a positive hero, romantic and sensitive person, which sets him very different from his former heroes. The whole trio of adventurers attracted with their humanity and purposefulness. The film was popular at the French box office, becoming one of Delon's biggest hits of the 1960s.
L'océan, l'hiver, c'est très beau, tu sais.
Je sais.
But the role in the film Diabolically Yours by Julien Duvivier was different. Delon had already worked with Duvivier in the film The Devil and the Ten Commandments. This time, the word devil is also included in the title of the picture, but this is no longer a short story, but a full-length film. The role given to the actor was intriguing. He portrayed a man with amnesia who, upon regaining his memory, chooses to keep this fact hidden from those around him. Filming was challenging largely due to the director's poor health as he entered his 80s. As a result, the film had to be re-edited multiple times. The result was harsh criticism of the film, which worsened Duvivier's physical and mental health. He lived only a few months after the premiere and died of a heart attack while driving a car. One of the brightest films of that year was Jean-Pierre Melville's Samouraï, which was written by the director specifically for Delon. In it, the actor's wife Nathalie Delon first appears on the screen. But the joint filming did not strengthen the couple's relationship, but on the contrary, put an end to them. The expressive nature of the woman annoyed the actor, and he himself was no easy person. Living together was difficult. From day one, we started fighting and yelling at each other. It's clear that our family scenes were more like episodes from a cheap comedy. In the midst of an argument, I usually defiantly try to leave, but Alain intercepted me on the doorstep and, clinging to the sleeve or hem of my dress, often tore my clothes. But there were also funny moments in their married life, as Nathalie recalled. One of our favorite hobbies was pouring something on the heads of passers-by. Alain chose restaurants with upper terraces for this purpose. From there, it was so much fun to attack the ignorant poor things without being noticed. By the way, Nathalie did not blame only Delon for a bad marriage. She took some of the blame on herself. For example, she said that she did not like to cook and did not bother to earn money as much as her husband, who often quoted fables, The Grasshopper and the Ant, calling himself, of course, an ant. Our marriage was built on passion and nerves, and one day, we both just couldn't stand it. Delon filed for divorce after the film ended, but the couple only signed the papers in February 1969 when Nathalie was granted custody of their son Anthony. While filming Les Samouraï, Milleville's private film studio was destroyed by fire, and the director himself, who called it suspicious, finished filming in another studio, not without alternative endings. In an interview, Milleville said that Delon's character Jeff was supposed to meet his death with a perfect smile on his lips, and the scene was already shot, but when the director found out that Delon had already had the exact same scene in another film, he reshot the end of his picture. Thanks to the efforts of the actors and director, the film became very successful both at the box office, collecting more than $40 million, and among critics who noted Les Samouraï makes the most of its spare aesthetic, using stylish and influential direction, solid performances, and thick atmosphere to weave an absorbing story. And in 2010, the film even took 39th place in the Empire Rating 100 Best Films of World Cinema.
Explication au fait que tu ne m'aies pas reconnu hier. Ou bien ça t'a amusé de jouer ce jeu parce que c'était la police. Ou bien tu ne devais pas me reconnaître.
The end of the 60s was also marked by Delon's new appearance on the stage. He agreed to take part in the production of his friend Jean Craus's play Les Heartthrob on the stage of the theater in Montmartre. The play was written for 3 actors in accordance with the traditions of a love triangle, but the internal conflict between the characters was tied to the homosexual relationship of Gino, played by Alain Delon, and a former racing driver. After long delays, the premiere took place on April 6, 1968, just before the Green Revolution. The director did not want to risk the integrity of the theater, fearing that the protesters would throw mud at it, boycotting Delon. Therefore, after 23 performances, the show, to Alain's great regret, stopped and did not resume after the end of the revolution. Despite some disappointment, Delon wasn't going to give up. After all, director Jean Vitrine suggested that he read the script of the not yet very famous writer Sébastien Japressot, Farewell Friend. Alain became interested and agreed to play one of the main roles, a former legionnaire and a doctor who becomes a victim of fraud by 2 women. Alain played in a male tandem with the American actor Charles Bronson. The actors got along very well during filming, but they couldn't help but compete. The director was easy with them, although he had to show considerable ingenuity in mise-en-scene in order to maintain tension among the audience. The film was a decent success. Working with Vitrine brought Alain Delon such pleasure that he soon starred in another film, Jeff, so named by the actor because of the name of his character in Les Samouraï. But the picture was not successful enough. The love affair was not enough to fascinate the unconditional fans of the actor. In addition, the friendship between the 2 bandits described in the film did not receive the proper depth and humanity. But this film had a special meaning for Delon. It starred the then very popular Mireille Darc, and what so happens often between partners on set happened here. An affair began, which suddenly became for both not just accidental, but something much more. At first, he seemed too beautiful and inspired me with fear, but in the midst of the Montrevic affair, he found himself in a situation where his weakness was revealed when he needed me. It became available, and I forgot about my fear. The Montrevic affair, which we'll discuss a little later, took place just at the time when Delon was shooting in another important film for him, The Swimming Pool. Released in early 1969, the main female role in it was given to Romy Schneider. Director Jacques Deray wanted to attract actors with a past to the film who could best play the characters of people at the dramatic crossroads of life, and who, if not Alain and Romy, could embody Deray's ideas on the screen. Schneider happily agreed to shoot with Delon. She was unhappy with her career after breaking up with her lover, and she wanted to prove to everyone what she was capable of. So Alain met Romy after 6 years of separation. The pleasure they felt shooting together was felt by the entire film crew, especially in love scenes. It was as if they decided to repeat their romance in front of millions of viewers, and there was something magical and ambiguous about it at the same time. Rumors began to appear in the press about a possible romance, but in fact there was nothing between the actors. Romy was married to Biasini at the time, and Delon had just broken up with Nathalie. They didn't want any complications. Their children, Anthony and David, became friends and willingly spent time together in the villa provided to the actor. It was really nice for them to meet again, to remember the past, but they were not going to repeat old mistakes. They both knew each other very well. Despite this, the selection of actors for the film The Swimming Pool was very successful, and critics highly appreciated the picture.
Toujours demain? Ouais. T'as remis ça? Quand? Ce soir. Bravo. Je regarde.
However, at this time, Delon was involved in a very high-profile case, the consequences of which will haunt him for the rest of his life. In the midst of filming The Swimming Pool in the Ramatuelle, there was a report in the press about the murder of Stefan Markovic, Delon's friend, bodyguard, and understudy. On October 1st, 1968, his body was found wrapped in burlap and thrown in a landfill near Paris in Elegance. Alain Delon looked frightened. At first, he even denied his acquaintance with the victim, but then, realizing that it was pointless, so many people knew about their relationship, he changed tactics and constantly repeated that he had nothing to do with the murder of Yugoslavian. Stefan was my understudy, he said in an interview. Everyone knows that he was granted political asylum in France. I got him out of jail. How could I leave him to his fate? I was afraid that he would end up behind bars again, so I found a job and a place to live for him. He lived in my private mansion on Messina Avenue, where there was enough space to keep us from facing each other. I set him up there. And so, the investigation into this murder attracted attention precisely because of the name of Alain Delon. First, police officers from Nice came to him on the set. Then he was summoned to Paris, to the General Directorate of the Police. The actor was forced to leave the film crew and fly there on the first plane. In the notebook of the murdered Stefan Markovic found during a search of his apartment, investigators found the addresses and phone numbers of not only people long known to the police, gangsters and scammers of various levels, but also many famous figures of cinema, theater, and pop with whom Stefan could meet only thanks to Delon. So there was a version, supported by the testimony of witnesses, that Stefan organized orgies with the participation of famous celebrities who wanted strong feelings, imperceptibly photographed them, and then with the help of friends, blackmailed. So the version that this blackmailer could be removed by someone from high society was the main one. But the police did not have any other evidence for some time until a big name came up. The most popular, Alain Delon. Markovic's attitude towards Delon was not adequate. The investigation became aware of the contents of a letter sent by the deceased to his older brother Alexander in Yugoslavia. There, Stefan allegedly hinted at threats from Alain Delon. His hostility to the actor in a letter to his brother gave the investigation a reason to cling to the version of jealousy. It turned out that the handsome Yugoslav had won the favor of Nathalie. It seems that Delon knew about this, but he was indifferent because he had already started divorce proceedings. But was he capable of killing his wife's lover? To a direct question from the correspondent whether it's true that Nathalie cheated on him with Stefan, he replied,
"He was a friend of mine and he was a friend of Nathalie since long, long ago. Then I got divorced with my wife. Then, after that, she became his mistress. But it's normal. She was free. And, well, it's maybe bad that she picked my friend. But she had her life, I had mine, and that's all, no more."
At that time, Delon was interested in Nathalie only because his son Anthony, who by the way was very friendly with Yugoslav, lived with her. In the same letter to Alexander Markovic, another name appeared, the name of Alain Delon's old friend, François Marcantini, who belonged to the Marseille Mafia. However, the investigation had no evidence against him at that time. In the future, he will be charged, but in a completely different case. And then there was a rather interesting intrigue against the former prime minister and obvious presidential candidate, Georges Pompidou. It turned out that Markovic's body was found near the villa of the same Marcantoni and the Pompidou family home. In this regard, the version began to be worked out that Markovic could have been killed by Delon in the Pompidou house, because in the compromising photos of Yugoslav allegedly appeared Madame Claude Pompidou. It was he who called for Marcantoni's help, who pushed the body into a mattress cover and threw it out in the public landfill of Elegance. However, Alain Delon was filming Ramatuelle and the film The Swimming Pool at that time, and although he was absent from the set on the alleged day of the murder, September 22nd, such a version was so absurd that it was quickly abandoned. In addition, his then lover, Mireille Jacques, confirmed that she was with him that day, and even Marcantoni has repeatedly said that, quote, Alain is not a guy who can harm or take revenge on someone. The investigation went the other way, and the actor got the opportunity to return to filming and finish the picture. As for Georges Pompidou, his enemies tried to compromise him, use the Biography affair. It's known that in this regard, he had an unpleasant conversation with then-President Charles de Gaulle, strongly defending his wife from any hints of his participation in Biography's orgies. However, all efforts to prevent Georges Pompidou from coming to power were unsuccessful. On June 15, 1969, he was elected president of the French Republic. Delon, of course, voted for him, secretly perhaps hoping that when he became president, he would remember how well he behaved during the investigation, but it didn't happen as expected. The hype surrounding Alain Delon's name continued unabated, and the actor became increasingly nervous, fearing for the lives of Nathalie and little Anthony. In this regard, on April 26, 1970, François published his letter to President Pompidou, in which the actor asked to protect his loved ones in connection with the upcoming business trip abroad. There are 3 things that are particularly dear to me: my son's life, my profession, and the viewer's respect. Of course, nothing happened to him on this trip, and the president's intervention was not necessary, but his letter attracted everyone's attention. And then in the hands of investigators was another Yugoslav from Delon's entourage and a friend of Markovic, Uros Milcevic, who began to testify that it was he who hired the killer to kill Stefan. But after a psychological examination, the doctors recognized Uros as crazy, and this version of the murder was also rejected. Interestingly, in August 1976, the newspapers will flash a report about his murder in one of the Brussels hotels. Even the mentally ill Milcevic was dangerous for someone. The Biography affair required 32 business trips of judges to France, 52 petitions to Interpol to conduct investigations according to various versions, calling 1,808 witnesses, drawing up 6,000 protocols for 50,000 pages. When the Marcantoni case was dismissed on January 12, 1976, the investigators again mentioned Delon in their opinion. So there was a legally flawless, but humanly ruthless phrase. You can go too far by attributing to Alain Delon, who plays the roles of scoundrels in the movies that made him so popular. The intention, with the help of one of his friends, Marcantoni, to get rid of the burdensome, who has also become a blackmailer, confidant. The Biography affair has attracted media and public attention for weeks because of Delon's involvement. Despite Delon's obvious connections to criminal circles, they did not harm Delon's popularity and value as an actor. They even reinforced his image as a character in the film The Sicilian Clan, which premiered at the end of the scandalous year, and Borsellino a year later. By the way, it was a great success thanks to the media's attention to the murder case. Delon's dangerous ties to Marseille's gangster circles were revealed again in 1991 when the newspaper Figaro reported that the actor was called to testify in the case of former Legionnaire Jacques Lafayette. Alain arrived at the trial in his helicopter and said that he really knew the accused during the filming of Borsellino in 1969, in which Jacques participated. In the film, Lafayette got the textured role of a boxer in the fight scene. We have a lot in common, Alain said at the time, confirming that Lafayette had been arrested in connection with 2 robberies, including one at the Rolex restaurant in Geneva on September 3, 1990. Alain sent him a telegram with just one word: hold on. However, what Delon said contradicted the testimony of the defendant himself, who denied that they had seen each other in the 1980s. Delon stubbornly claimed that Lafayette came to the filming of the film 3 Men to Kill that was in 1980. But the investigator did not go into details and thanked the witness, who both arrived and flew in his helicopter with a sense of accomplishment. But his testimony did not mitigate the court's decision, which imposed a severe sentence on Lafayette. After that, the name of the actor did not appear in connection with any investigations. He must have learned a lesson, and as a public figure to whom attention has been drawn, he became more cautious, cutting off some of the ties that might have compromised him. And then in the late 60s and early 70s, Biography affair gave him a new round of controversial popularity, which, however, he used to promote his production projects. Producer Delon really worked hard, but despite good criticism, his projects did not bring him much money. The actor knew which films with his participation were particularly attractive to the mass audience, and gradually he came to a film that was a success with both moviegoers and became very profitable. We're talking about Borsellino, a story about the struggle of mafia clans. When Eugene Saccomanno's book Bandits à Marseille caught his eye in 1969, he immediately bought the rights to it and gave the team to write the script for Borsellino. Interestingly, in the book, there's a photo in which Delon and Nathalie were shot together with the Marseille's authority, Barthélemy Guerini. This photo was often used by the actor's enemies to prove his closeness to the Marseille bandits. However, he decided to implement this film. Moreover, he played a Marseille gangster there himself. Delon invested all the funds of his company, Adele Productions, in the shooting, and also attracted producers from France and Italy. But the best investment was his old friend Jean-Paul Belmondo. As soon as it became known that he agreed to take part in the picture, its shares immediately went up. The American company Paramount has agreed to take over the rental on very favorable terms, and looking ahead, let's say that the film gathered more than 40 million viewers on the big screens, which brought producer Delon a considerable fortune. The criticism was less favorable than the audience. The film was reproached for the fact that the real characters of the story are violent gangsters and famous fascists depicted in the film as romantics. However, as you can see, this did not affect the box office in any way because the movie earned $35 million. Interestingly, the release of the film was not without a scandal. Unexpectedly, the newspapers reported on Belmondo's dissatisfaction with the way the film was presented on the poster and to the audience in the credits. Instead of writing Adele Production represents, the credits read, Alain Delon represents Alain Delon and Jean-Paul Belmondo. Belmondo himself allegedly stated that he was suing for non-compliance with the terms of the contract. Subsequently, Jean-Paul did not attend the premiere of the film. Later, it was reported that the court ruled in his favor, but nothing's known about how Delon reacted, and in general, many people then thought this whole scandal was just a PR move designed to attract even more attention to the film. However, no one argued that Belmondo's contribution to Borsellino was decisive. This was confirmed by the small box office receipts of Borsellino & Co. in 1974, in which Jean-Paul Belmondo did not star due to the death of his character in the first part. The film itself did not fail at the box office, but it's difficult to call it successful. In the future, Delon will never make films with the sequel. Instead, he continued to collaborate with a good friend, Jean-Pierre Melville, on the set of the film The Red Circle, and then 2 years later in the film A Cop. In the first, he played a gangster, in the second, a policeman. He followed the same path as Jean Gabin. While The Red Circle was a success, the role of cop Delon apparently was not accepted because the picture collected little at the box office. By the way, this was Melville's last film because soon the director died of a heart attack. In his memoirs, journalist François Chélier wrote, "In Jean-Pierre Melville's personal life, Alain Delon held a special place. He embodied the ideal of a man both physically and morally, perhaps even in an immoral way. If Melville weren't Melville, he would want to be Delon." In addition to producing, Delon's field of interest gradually changed. This was largely influenced by his beloved Myriel Darc, who became not only his common-law wife, but also helped him in business. I've had a few lives with Alain. I felt like I was in a movie all the time. We received many guests in the house. It looked like I was doing what I wanted to do and what I would never have been able to do otherwise. I did business. I used my freedom to invest my energy in completely different things. For him, for him, for him. So, with the assistance of the actress, Alain began to produce perfumes with his portrait on the bottle, which were in great demand in Argentina, the United States, and especially Japan. Delon's cosmetics were sold in 80 countries around the world where his perfume stores opened, and he successfully sold ties, glasses, and pens. 80% of its products with the AD brand were sold out in Asian countries. In Italy, the actor had a furniture factory for very rich clients. All this activity took up a lot of time for him and Myriel, so there were fewer and fewer films with his participation. The actress also gave Alain an original gift. She wrote the script for the film The Lovemates in 1970 about the perfect modern love for three, and even sang in this film. Of course, they both played the main roles. However, such an experiment failed, and the film failed at the box office. Darc also starred with him in the 1971 film Fantasia Among the Squares by Guy Perret, where the actor had a cameo role. And 3 years later, she starred in Borsellino & Co., which we already had mentioned, and Icy Breasts. And while the first one was received by the public, the second one was a real hit in France. The couple also worked together in 1977 on the films Man in a Hurry and Death of a Corrupt Man, but it was quite obvious that in these films, Darc deliberately went into the shadows, giving in to her lover. However, such a sacrifice, cold, handsome Delon could not appreciate. Instead, he was more concerned with his business and led the life of an extravagant collector. First, it was a painting of the 16th century, then he became interested in the Dutch of the 17th century, then in the Italian Renaissance, then in the painting of France of the 19th century. In 1990, he even exhibited part of his collection at the Didier Imbert Gallery. The luxury catalogs of this exhibition were sold for 1.5 million francs, which he donated to the Cancer Foundation. In 1975, Delon sold part of his collection to buy for two with another entrepreneur, Bourgeois, for 53 million francs. The Pretty Vegetable Vendor by Amadeo Modigliani. Then this picture alternately hung from one owner, then from another. Delon himself called the pretty vegetable vendor the most expensive woman in his life. He also had a good collection of weapons, and when he wanted to have a car in his garage that belonged to the famous singer Luis Mariano, he sent him a check without the amount. This can be called the whims of a rich person, but sometimes Delon did things that no one expected of him. So in 1976, for example, he purchased the manuscript of the famous address of General de Gaulle, which he made on London radio on June 18, 1940, calling for resistance to the invaders. All French people know the phrase from this appeal: France has lost the battle, but France has not lost the war. A true detective story is connected with this manuscript. The owner of a valuable manuscript, once left unattended by the general on his desktop, set one condition: the buyer must be a foreigner. That is, 2 pages of de Gaulle's handwriting must go abroad. Alain involved an Argentine friend in the operation, and the auction was sealed with signatures and seals. Then they argued for a long time about where this rarity should be stored, and in the end we came to the conclusion that the best place is the Musée de l'Ordre de la Libération. At the ceremony of presenting the manuscript to the master of the order, Alain Delon heard the words that deeply touched him. "You were a soldier. I thank you and am proud that you are still behaving like a French soldier." Many thought that the actor did this to restore his reputation after the high-profile Markovic affair. "This is a lie," Delon demanded. "I would have done it anyway. I wanted to keep a historical document in France." And then he added angrily, "No matter what I do in this country, they immediately start suspecting me of something disgusting." Of course, Alain Delon has worked hard to make people think of him worse than he really was, but his work ethic could be envied by everyone. I need to act, move, and get rich. The main thing is to show responsibility. I'm just that kind of person. The actor did not forget about participating in film projects. Of the most striking films of the 70s, in addition to those already mentioned in collaboration with his beloved Muriel Darc, we can also single out Zorro in 1975, where Alain played the hero under a mask. Although the film did not cause enthusiasm among critics, the film was watched by more than 70 million people worldwide, and Delon himself, who has long wanted to play such a character since the time of Black Tulip, was satisfied with the project and participation in it. He also appeared on the screens in his more familiar role in the film Flick Story. Delon took on the role of a real-life police commissioner who swapped his gun for the pen of a detective writer from his practice. In his novel, he told the story of the hunt and imprisonment of a mentally ill killer. The film was well received by critics, who named it the best police film of the year. But in 1976, the premiere of the successful mystical drama Mr. Klein took place at the Cannes Film Festival, produced by Alain Delon, who played the main role in it. The film tells the story of a Parisian art merchant who is mistaken for a Jew with the same name and becomes a target of the Holocaust. Unable to confirm his identity, Mr. Klein received wide critical acclaim and won 3 Caesar Awards, including Best Film, and the actor was nominated for Best Actor. All other projects of those years showed Delon as a character on the side of the law or outside of it, which didn't add versatility to his resume. Interestingly, Delon's first serious relationship with Romy Schneider did not let him go until the end of her life. So in 1981, after the actor found out that Romy's son had died, he could not leave her in trouble. Alain pulled her out of her depression, and his common-law wife Muriel took her shopping, bought new dresses and hats, tried to cheer her up and distract her. By the way, Darc was also attached to Delon's son Anthony, whom she also treated with tenderness. They had a good relationship, unlike Anthony's strained relationship with his father. As the newspaper Le Monde wrote about Alain, there is no doubt that his arrogance, huge but never fully realized by him, led to the fact that he began to consider his sons as potential rivals, whose ambitions should have been nipped in the bud. And indeed, Anthony, unlike Delon's other children, which we will discuss later, did not see anything good from his father. Alain and Nathalie divorced when their son was just 4 years old, leading to a situation where he was often passed back and forth between them. Anthony was transferred from boarding school to boarding school and never raised properly. If you do not consider detachment and intimidation to be education, Anthony said, quote, "I was always terribly afraid of my father. I started to be afraid of him as soon as I woke up. I felt an inexplicable fear when he entered the room, when we were sitting at the table, driving in the car." Probably the reason for this was his domineering, intolerant nature, his way of looking at me, Anthony continued, and the fact that he talked to me like an adult when I was just 5 years old. Then I said to myself, men don't cry. Anthony inherited his father's defiance and short temper, and he had to work hard on himself to get rid of these qualities. He said that at the age of 12, that is just when his father starred in the movie Boomerang, he behaved like a madman, threw friends into a pool filled with cold water, overturned a boat with girls in the middle of the lake, broke the windows of neighbors. Between the ages of 8 and 14, everything happened to me, he said. He added, when I was little, my father had 17 angry dogs. He alone could approach them. They bite everyone. One day, he made me go to their cage and feed them, and he was standing behind the fence with a gun. Come in, he told me. A man shouldn't be a coward. I was 10 years old. Delon Sr. had peculiar parenting methods. He probably realized this later. Delon's relationship with his son will always be strained. Delon Sr. was friends with Belmondo Sr. Delon Jr. was friends with Belmondo Jr. Once the guys were detained by the traffic police when they were under the influence of drugs. Their parents barely managed to get them out of this mess. Anthony rebelled against his father's tyranny. He inherited a bad temper from Alain. He didn't really think about the tests his patience was putting him to. But the Delon family's troubles were not limited to this. In the early 80s, Delon's beloved Mireille Darc had a hard time. The actress always had heart problems, but the attacks became so acute that it became impossible to postpone the operation. So Mireille underwent surgery in 1980. Alain never left my side, and when I was taken into the operating room, he ran after the gurney until the last second, holding my hand. After the operation, there was a long period of rehabilitation, so the woman spent a lot of time in bed. The whole of France watched the events with bated breath. Everyone was waiting for the actress to finally recover, and a star wedding is just around the corner, but it never happened. The reason was called the inability of Darc to give birth to children due to heart problems. And in addition, while the woman was undergoing rehabilitation after surgery, Delon had another relapse, an affair with actress Anne Perilot, much younger than him. Delon met her on the set of the film For a Cop's Hide. Together, they appeared in another film, The Fighter, but Perilot herself, who would later become famous for the film Nikita, considered both films passable. Delon himself admitted to Darc about his romance, telling her, quote, I couldn't control myself. It was love at first sight. It was impossible to resist. Mireille, after 15 years together, seeing how her lover is moving away from her, she decided to break off the relationship while still in the hospital. In addition, she later admitted that she was aware of his other affairs on the side during their life together. However, she loved Delon very much and turned a blind eye to his weaknesses. While we lived together, he had a lot of adventures, but how could it be otherwise? Said the actress. Did Delon calm down with Anne? Of course not. A year later, he met Catherine Pironi, the ex-wife of famous Formula One driver Didier Pironi. The couple's relationship did not work out even before Delon appeared in her life, so it's probably not worth saying that the actor was to blame for their divorce. By that time, Delon had no longer met Anne Perilot and was free. In the fall of 1984, they started living together. Kiki was a quiet, modest, sincere woman, not a star, which probably suited Delon quite well, who wanted to take a break from the vicissitudes of star life. Their relationship lasted about 3 years and came to naught in the spring of 1987. But before that happened, Delon wasn't having the best period, all because of problems with his son. In August 1984, Anthony was sent to prison for speeding at the Belgian border and overtaking a police officer. The following year, he was again detained in connection with the attempt on the life of a partner, and during a search of their company's office, they found a large amount of cash that was not supported by bank accounts. Alain was desperate for this behavior of his son. He even refused to take part in a banquet on the occasion of the end of shooting the film Cop's Honor, which, by the way, he dedicated to Kiki. Delon developed a depression from which he came out only after learning about the release of his son. Anthony also tried his hand at movies, appearing in several films. The start was successful, but the young man did not use it. His father, frankly, did not want to help him make a film career, and he, out of pride, did not turn to him for help. Delon himself was awarded the Order of Arts and Letters at that time. Interestingly, the ceremony was held not in the Élysée Palace of the president as usual, but near it in the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. The order was worn around his neck by the then Minister of Culture, Jacques Lang, whom Delon had repeatedly attacked rather sarcastically before. This time, both decided to forget about their differences. Lang called Delon the seigneur of world cinema, and added pointedly, quote, "You, like me, put art and beauty above political ideals." But the Legion of Honor, which Delon had dreamed of for a very long time, was awarded to him only 5 years later, and already in the Élysée Palace itself. Delon himself did little acting in the late 80s, appearing only in the title role in the French supernatural thriller The Passage, of which he was the author and producer. The film, with an interesting leitmotif, How to Deceive Death, became a hit at the box office. In an interview, Delon referred to The Passage as, quote, "a message to father and son." To the father, it was his way of telling Tom that he, Alain, had remained a child deprived of parental love. Quote, "Never, even when he died," Delon said, "did I remember him with such tenderness." As for his son, it was not so much a message as a promise of forgiveness. Delon imagined that in 20 years he would take his grandson to watch this film in which the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, acts. So far, he could only dream of it. Anthony had no intention of making him a grandfather, and in general, their relationship was still far from perfect. Because in the same year Anthony again had problems with the Internal Revenue Service, he significantly underestimated the amount of his income. The young man claimed that the undeclared cars and motorcycles found at his home were bought with his parents' money, but Alain and Nathalie did not support this version. Despite this, his lawyers managed to save Anthony from punishment. After a while, Anthony encountered his father on a business basis. After opening a leather goods store, Anthony placed the AD label on his products, as Alain did. He became angry and sued his son, accusing him of disloyal competition. The court forced Delon Jr. to write his full name on the trademark. In addition, he was fined 10,000 francs. Of course, all this did not contribute to the normalization of relations between the two Delons. Do you think you would sue your son over the brand name? Write in the comments and let's discuss it. The beginning of the 90s was marked by a number of interesting works by Alain Delon. It was as if he had decided to start all over again, to breathe new life into his career. So there are 3 completely different films: New Wave, Dancing Machine, and The Return of Casanova. The main feature of Jean-Luc Godard's first film, New Wave, was that much of the dialogue consisted of quotes from various sources, primarily literary. Delon in the film played the role of doppelgangers who at some point in their lives have a relationship with one woman. The picture was filled with symbolism, and Godard, in his outrageous manner, claimed that he gave Alain the roles of heroes of the Old and New Testaments. The actor himself obviously was interested in the opportunity to move away from the usual role of policemen and gangsters and try something new. Despite the interesting tandem of an extraordinary director and a capricious actor, critics' opinions about the film were divided. Vincent Canby, writing a review in the New York Times at the time, denounced the film as a full-length lipstick commercial, concluding that, quote, only people who despise the great Godard films could be anything but saddened by this one. However, the film, which was unsuccessful in the United States, received support in other countries, and some critics even recognized New Wave as one of the best films of the year. Another was the experience of working on The Dance Machine. There, Delon plays the role of Alan Wolfe, an embittered, autocratic former ballet superstar who runs a studio where several young dancers die suspiciously. In the work on the role, he was assisted by the opera choreographer Patrick Dupont. Alain Delon, who always moved well and in this role was plastic and even elegant, despite his ugliness. And no matter how the audience felt about his character, the actor's obvious desire for self-renewal could not but inspire respect. The situation on the set of the film was restless. Alain Delon and director Guy Leopard often openly feuded. The actor did not agree with the choice of one of the actresses and, rebelling, disappeared altogether for 3 days. Then an angry Leopard did not appear on the set. He generally expressed his dissatisfaction with the director of modern dances with his fists. However, this picture was not accepted by the audience. Distressed, Alain Delon said at the time, quote, slander and envy are essential companions of popularity, stating the terrible reviews and the lack of viewers in the halls where the picture was shown. After the failure of the previous film, Delon was worried and angry with the press. He really wanted Dance Machine to appeal to his audience, but they clearly did not want to understand that he changes with age. All this, however, faded into the background due to his unexpected paternity for many. Rosalie van Bremen, a 21-year-old Dutch model, came into his life after an affair with Kiki Perroni. Regarding their acquaintance, there are several versions. According to one of them, by the way, told by Delon, he was supposed to make a video for German television and perform some songs from his musical record, Comme au Cinéma, accompanied by a small female vocal and dance group. At the last moment, one of the singers could not come and asked her friend to replace her. The friend turned out to be Rosalie van Bremen, who, according to Delon, was neither a singer nor a dancer, but in order to earn extra money, she agreed to improvise. They met during a rehearsal, and then, without parting, traveled together to Germany. According to another version, their acquaintance took place in January 1990 in China. Delon came on business for his perfume company and along the way was engaged in the promotion of the picture Parole des Flics. Rosalie showed off samples of new clothes. They allegedly returned to Paris together. Anyway, after that, the couple became inseparable, and on November 25, 1990, he informed the whole world that he had a daughter named Anushka. This unexpected news unpleasantly struck close friends who saw Delon's paternity as a maneuver on the part of a young Dutch woman and allowed themselves to speak out about it publicly, as if she knew about Alain's desire to have children and stopped at nothing to give birth to his daughter and thus have all the privileges of her favorite star. Delon was offended. He even wrote and wanted to send out a very sharp letter to everyone. However, after thinking about it, he did not send it out, and he did the right thing because from the moment Anushka was born, he began to look at everything with different eyes and become much softer and kinder. 4 years later, Rosalie gave birth to a son named Alain Fabian, a name that symbolically combined Delon's own name and that of his father, who had recently passed away, with whom he had reconciled before his death. The role of an elderly 65-year-old father clearly appealed to Delon. This was evident during the opening retrospective of his films at the Cinémathèque in March 1996, when he took to the stage with both children. But with the pleasure of playing the role of a father in life, he could not completely abandon business and cinema. The peace of mind, the happiness that Rosalie and their children then brought to his home, all this prompted him to take new and unexpected steps for many. So he starred in the film The Return of Casanova by Edouard Nierman. It was a poignant account of aging, which Delon was beginning to feel more and more every day, especially with young Rosalie. Many critics appreciated such a bold gesture of the actor to show his vulnerability, writing that, quote, "This brilliant comedy of morals deals a serious blow to the detractors of Alain Delon, who proved that he did not lose anything in his skill, risking if not to undress completely, then at least to throw off some of his clothes." Unfortunately, the audience did not share these views, and therefore the film failed at the box office. As we can see, approaching his 60th birthday, Delon increasingly thought about his age, family relationships, loved ones, and friends. And after passing this milestone, he began to judge many things not with such aggressiveness as before. In 2000, he even agreed to head the jury at the Paris Film Festival and began to attend various social events which he had previously shunned. Delon learned to separate success from happiness by noticing that success is a professional phenomenon and happiness is purely personal. If I am allowed to, I will say that I've achieved everything I wanted and have succeeded in life. It'll be another 3 years before Delon stars as an aging writer who has lost his courage and retired somewhere far away from the bustling world in Mexico in the film Day and Night. If you approach this role from the point of view of another invasion of the problem of old age, creative impotence, then Delon's consent to star in the film can still be somehow understood. It's more difficult to understand this from the point of view of purely production, bearing in mind that the film was shot by a newcomer to cinema, the famous philosopher Bernard Henry Lévy. But Alain apparently missed the movie because he devoted more time to business and he liked the script, so the actor agreed to star in the film. The drama Day and Night was released in 1996 when Delon was everywhere. He participated on television in the program Bouillon de Culture, played in films, on the stage of the theater, not to mention numerous interviews that he gave to various publications photographed alone or with children. But despite the widespread advertising of the film on the front pages of leading newspapers and radio and television programs on the eve of its release, the reception turned out to be more than cool. Critics reacted to the picture ironically. They did not even condemn Delon, wondering why he got even involved in this picture, but rather the director and his vision. He and Belmondo were not invited to the 50th anniversary of the Cannes Film Festival, which angered both film legends. In the interviews of that time, Alain did not choose his words. This is a denial of who we are and what we represent. Something has been wrong in this country for the last 40 years. It seems to me that in this context, Delon and Belmondo couldn't be overlooked. We don't care about the festival. France is much more important to us. These troubles, however, led to a joint work of movie legends called Half a Chance. In addition to them, the then popular Vanessa Paradis was included in the film. Such a triangle should have worked, but it didn't. An interesting story where a young girl finds out which of the two men is her father was not enough to attract the attention of the public. The commercial success was mediocre, and the critics did not understand the meaning of the movie. Disappointed by another failed film, Delon retired from the film industry for a while and devoted all his time to family and business. His capital was invested in many profitable gambling businesses. In a charter company, he owned a decent stable, and he continued to expand his collection of paintings. At the same time, the actor still wanted to stand in front of the camera and try on another role. Perhaps he wanted to prove that he was still capable of more. His friend Jean Cros described the actor as follows. As a friend, he's not the most comfortable. In an instant rush, he's capable of giving the most precious thing and showing tenderness, but it often seems like he's just defending himself. Pride and the desire for power are foreign to him. He possesses not a drop of vanity, as he demands nothing from others and relies solely on himself. As for the family dramas, Alain never legalized his relationship with Rosalie, who bore him 2 children. The couple continued to live in a civil marriage. However, in the fall of 2002, it was reported in the newspapers that Delon decided to live separately for reasons of a confidential nature. As you might guess, family happiness has come to an end. The young woman, as she admitted to reporters, is tired of enduring the vile nature of the actor, tyranny, and rigidity. So this relationship, which lasted more than 12 years, came to its logical conclusion. It was much harder for Delon to bear this breakup than the previous ones. Moreover, the initiator of the breakup was Rosalie herself, dealing a painful blow to the ego of the first lover of French cinema. Delon fell into a terrible depression. It was particularly hard going through the divorce because of Anouchka and Alain Delon. The actor had a special relationship with his daughter. "To no other woman have I so often said I love you," the actor said. It is she who he will call the woman of his life. It is her who he will love immensely, and it is to her that he will leave half of the entire inheritance. But more on that later. "I adore my children. I've been waiting for them too long. They came to me so late. This divorce is killing me, and it breaks my heart that I'm only allowed to see them 2 weekends a month." But Delon was a strong man, and he coped with the drama that he probably provoked himself. He was faced with many money and property issues that arose after the breakup. Although Delon was not officially married to Rosalie, he undoubtedly provided for and took care of the children. The actor returned to the set only in 2008, playing the Roman Emperor Caesar in the film Asterix at the Olympic Games. In the image of Caesar, Delon fits seamlessly into this frivolous comedy, once again proving to everyone how versatile his talent is and how much unspent creative energy is still in him. The great commander in his performance is a selfish narcissist who cannot tear himself away from his own reflection in the mirror. Alain plays him with self-irony, so this role can be called a kind of self-parody.
César ne vieillit pas. Il mûrit. Ses cheveux ne blanchissent pas, ils s'illuminent. César est immortel. Pour longtemps.
At the time of its release, Asterix at the Olympics was the most expensive French and non-English language film of all time. The film was negatively received by critics, but performed well at several European box offices, topping the charts in Poland, Spain, and France. It was Alain Delon's last film before his death. But before we tell you about the last years of the actor's life and the scandals that accompanied him, check if you're subscribed to our channel. And of course, don't forget to like this video. We tried very hard. Ready? Then let's move on. Before death, birds hide. Really big animals die in the spotlight. The last years of the actor's life were shrouded in scandals, mainly related to his children. Delon officially ended his acting career in 2019, appearing as himself in the film Disclaimer by Michael Denisov. However, his theatrical career ended back in 2008. The actor summed up his life in an interview. "Life brings me nothing more. I've seen everything. I've lived it. But most importantly, I hate this era. It makes me sick." However, in the last years of Delon's life, there were also behind-the-scenes intrigues caused by his own children. By then, Ari, his unrecognized son, had already died at the age of 60 from years of illegal substance abuse. For most of his life, he wanted his father to recognize him, but that never happened. At Delon's stepfather's funeral when the two met, Alain had no desire to continue communicating with Ari, saying that they had nothing in common. He never believed that this was his real son, or he just didn't want to believe it. Because of this attitude of his own father and the dependent mother who gave the baby her pills, Ari was hooked on prohibited substances from an early age. They killed him. The son of a wealthy actor died alone in his apartment, where he was found only a few weeks later. But the three recognized children found nothing better than to share their mutual claims with the media. There were insults, accusations, lawsuits, and secretly recorded conversations. The initiator, first of all, was 59-year-old Anthony Delon, an actor and son of Alain's first wife, Nathalie. He gave an interview to Paris Match in which he accused his younger half-sister Anouchka of lying and scheming because she allegedly hid the results of tests on their father's cognitive abilities. 33-year-old Anouchka did not remain silent and made a statement published by her lawyer. It claimed that their father, together with Anthony, can, quote, no longer tolerate the aggressive behavior of his son, who constantly claims that he, the father, has gone mad. The brother and sister did not stop there and once again publicly insulted each other, this time performing on French television. After that, 29-year-old Alain Delon intervened in the conflict and on the side of his half-brother and not his own sister. He posted a secretly recorded video on Instagram in which, according to him, Anouchka cast her brothers in a negative light before their father. Then it was time for mutual lawsuits related to the treatment of Delon, who suffered a stroke in 2019. Despite this, the legal passions surrounding the film legend were not limited to his children. After all, here it is worth mentioning 66-year-old Hiromi Roland, a former maid and, according to some sources, Delon's mistress. A year before his death, the actor's children, showing rare unanimity, kicked her out of their father's house. Roland filed a lawsuit against them, saying they put Delon's life at risk by not giving him the necessary medication. However, the actor's children also reported her to the police, accusing her of morally abusing her father, appropriating his correspondence, cruelty to animals, intentional violence, kidnapping, and abuse of a weak state. The tragedy took place in an estate built by Delon in a wooded area 74 miles southeast of Paris. It was there that he lived out his life with his youngest son, Alain Delon. However, sometimes the father was visited by other children. The saddest thing was that all parties to the conflict recognized that although Alain Delon was physically weak and did not always adequately perceive reality, he was still in his right mind most of the time and was aware of the horror of what was happening to his family. Later, it became known that Alain Delon suffered from Alzheimer's disease. He was also diagnosed with cancer. Shortly before his death, the actor's condition deteriorated, leading to his declaration of incapacity and placement under care. However, the star was appointed a special state agent for the care of children, and the children were deprived of this opportunity. Alain Delon passed away on August 18th at the age of 88. Half of his property went to his beloved daughter Anushka, and another half was shared between the two sons of the star. Well, you can see the controversial personality of Alain Delon differently. However, we think that no one will deny that he has become a true legend of cinema. His attractive appearance, interesting images on the screen, and full dedication to art deserve a special place in the hearts of moviegoers around the world. Of course, you can condemn his attitude to mistresses and wives, connection with the mafia, and unconventional upbringing of children, but we will remember him more as one of the brightest actors of the last century, who left a noticeable mark on the development of European cinema. That's all for today. If you want to learn more about other stars, click on the video that appeared on your screen. We will also be grateful for your comments and likes. The Biographer channel was with you. See you in the next video.